Okay, so now we are officially recording. So, hi, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing okay. Thank you for rescheduling. I'm going out of town in a couple days, and I had two meetings that were scheduled for Wednesday, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah,
So,
no worries. Yeah,
thank you
no
for
problem.
rescheduling. So, let's just jump right in, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, let's start at the very beginning. What got you into ski racing, and was it just your family that took the initiative and said, "Hey, we're going to take you skiing," or was it partially your doing, saying, "Can we continue to go?"
Um, my family were big skiers, and not ski racers particularly, but skiers. So I was walking around the house on plastic skis at age 1 and skiing at age 2. But they definitely weren't the kind of parents that would push me to do something if I didn't like it. And skiing was one of the things that I just loved, and I was always dressed and ready to go, to go out the door every morning to go skiing. So yeah, it was kind of something that I continued to push. And then when it came to ski racing, that was totally my thing, and I loved that about it was they knew just as much about ski racing as I did, which was basically nothing, and I kind of drove that train.
So, had you not grown up in New England, what do you think you would be doing now?
I don't know. I say that anything in motion, like surfing, if I was by the coast, or mountain biking, or some form of motion.
And do you think that you were kind of meant to ski? I mean, I was watching a video that you had done a couple years ago where you were saying, all I want to do is just get to the Olympics. And I'm wondering if you're still on that kind of that wavelength.
Yeah, like that's the ultimate dream is the Olympics, and it's a really nice metric because it means that you're like top 4 or something in the country, and you're being selected to go represent the country at a very big event. I would totally be psyched to go to the Olympics, but I think at the end of the day, I realized that the way that my brain kind of works, if I'm just focused on the Olympics, then and if I don't go, or if I have other international success but not Olympic success, I want my ultimate satisfaction to come from knowing I worked the hardest I could, and knowing that I won big races. The Olympics are kind of a nice metric, but it's not my specific personal ultimate whatever.
So we were talking about just being in the zone completely because your sport requires that you are completely 100% in tune with what your body is doing, and if it's not, you get injured really easily. What does what kind of pre-race rituals do you have that you say, okay, I'm not going to feel in the zone until I do these things?
Oh, a funny one is I I always have to pee before I go out of the start gate. Like
Most
I,
horses do that.
yeah, yeah, like I've got to pee. Uh, but generally, I've just got to take a bunch of laps. I've got to ski a few laps and just get warmed up. Sometimes listen to music, sometimes I don't. But there's no specific routine. It's just about like skiing and making sure that I'm enjoying myself, feeling that flow.
So when you're in a sport that is not technically an extreme sport like motocross or something like that, but where the risk of injury is constantly high, and knowing that you're going to get injured is kind of what they tell you at orientation,
Yeah.
how do you deal with the possibility that you could get injured at any race?
It's sometimes it's scarier than others. Sometimes you think about it and you see one of your teammates go down, and it becomes a little more real. But at the end of the day, like any quote unquote extreme sport athlete has to do, uh, you have to just compartmentalize, and you have to kind of accept, the biggest thing is accepting that it probably will happen at some point. And once you can get over that hurdle, then you can kind of take that little box in your mind and put it aside and say, okay, like may happen at some point. I've come to terms with that. Now the only thing to do is to uh, send it with no regrets and just go for it.
Do you think that other people watching, if they knew that you had that mentality every single time you went down the slopes, that they would think that you were reckless? I mean, just putting your body to do what it does.
Yeah, I think people consider that reckless. I think there's, when we talked in our pre-interview, you really got my brain going because I was thinking about how, people that don't do these sports don't really understand that, like, why someone would take so much risk. Like they consider it reckless because when you look at it logically, it is reckless. Like you are getting like a nice dose of adrenaline and endorphins, and they're at the risk of potentially, like I did, snapping your leg, your knee, or whatever. So logically, it doesn't make sense. And my kind of rebuttal to that is that it's not something I do for fun. If I wanted to have some fun, there's plenty of ways to have fun. If I wanted to make money, there's plenty of ways to make money. It's kind of, I've been doing it since I'm 2. It's kind of my life. It's kind of the way I express myself, and it's kind of a higher purpose that I'm pushing towards.
So when you look at your career up to this point, was there ever a situation where you looked back and said, this is exactly what I want to be doing?
Yeah, all the time. This is this is exactly what I want to be doing.
That's
It's
great.
nice. It's nice to have, a lot of people don't really know what they want to do with their life. And I don't know I don't know what I want to do after ski racing, but I do know that right now, this is exactly what I want to be doing.
And exactly where you want to be. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
sans tib fib injury.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Dartmouth. How did you get there? What was the process of getting recruited or walking onto the team? And did you find a home there? I mean, do you still talk to your teammates and your coaching staff now that you're kind of moved on from that period of your life?
I don't talk to them too much. It's funny. The coach at Dartmouth is extremely good at organizing and creating a good team. But he, when it comes to in terms of like advice on the course, uh, I've found other coaches that are better at that I think for that. Uh, I've kept some contact with my teammates, but really they're all starting to graduate. So I have less and less ties there, unfortunately.
So, when did US Ski and Snowboard see you first?
They invited at the end of my senior year of high school, out of the blue. I hadn't had great results, but I'd had just enough to kind of put me on the map. And at the end of my senior year of high school, the US Ski Team invited me to this basically tryout camp to qualify for the development team, what we call the D team. And I had a great camp, like total kind of out of the blue, and they put me on the team. And so for 2 years after high school, I skied with the development team.
So, you were essentially what, 18 or 19,
17.
representing the
Yeah.
US. What was
And
that like?
it wasn't on a, professional stage. We were still, young kids on the development team, but it felt pretty cool. And it was my ultimate goal since I was 5 years old. So when I got that call to say that I'd made it, I definitely went running around the house screaming, and everyone in the family was pretty excited.
I mean, even just to be in that funnel with the athletes that you've grown up watching at the Olympics and on TV. I mean, how did that feel to even sit back and kind of say, although I'm not at this level yet, if I continue to work, I've already been noticed for what I'm doing currently. It's all up from here.
Yeah, it was cool because I that summer I moved out to Park City, Utah, and started training in the US Ski Team gym. And right in the squat rack next to me was Ted Ligety, like the best GS skier of all time, someone who I'd watched tape on him over and over and over again. So that was pretty surreal. And then the part that you mentioned about not being there yet, but hoping to be, that's what I realized is my whole life since I was 5, I said, I'm going to make the US ski team. And then when I made the US ski team, I was like, wait, there's so much more to do. Like, I'm not even close to where, like, and then I realized, okay, once I make the B team, once I make the A team, once I make the World Cup, uh, then like that can't be the ultimate goal, because then I'm going to want to win. And so I kind of, that was a big moment for me of, it doesn't end until you retire.
So now that you're on the B team, I mean, do you look back at that D team Jimmy and say, you had no idea what you were in for?
Oh yeah, no idea. And no idea what I was doing really.
So while you were on the development team, who was helping you?
I had 2 coaches on the development team that were really great guys. I had one guy that would tell me everything I was doing wrong, and one guy that was constantly being positive. So it was this nice little balance. And it was kind of a mom dad situation. Like, when one of them was kind of mad at me, I go to the other, like, hey, can you help me out? So it was a good atmosphere for 2 years.
So how many people were also skiing with you on that development team while you were there?
It was, I think, around 8 kids. uh, and some of them are still with me now on the B team and on the World Cup, and some went off to have impressive college careers.
So was there a certain part of the country that they were all coming from, or was it kind of like New
All
England
over
and
the
also
place.
like
Yeah,
Colorado?
we had one kid from the Pacific Northwest. We had a few kids like me from Vermont and New Hampshire, and one kid from Utah, a few kids from Colorado. So all over the place. And that was kind of our fun point of contention was, East versus West. The Eastern mountains are way smaller, and it rains all the time, and they're kind of miserable. And the Western mountains are beautiful and sunny. So we had our inside jokes and kind of, crap we'd throw at each other.
So which do you prefer?
Oh, I mean, skiing in the West is a beautiful thing. It's always sunny and it's warm and the snow is nice. But I can't leave my, I got to stay loyal to the Eastern Mountains. That's where I learned a little bit of grit.
So let's talk about the World Junior Championships and the road to get there, and then how you did.
So yeah, I got cut from the development team, went to college at Dartmouth, and kind of going to school and skiing at the same time was this magic brew that suddenly I was skiing really, really well. And halfway through the college season, I basically got up and left and went to the World Junior Championships, and you know uh, did well there. And the American boys were the best men's junior team in the world that year, which is still to date one of my favorite memories ski racing.
So why do you think that the development team cut you, and are you thankful for that because it brought you to this point, or is there is there something that looking back on that you could have done differently or would have done differently if given the chance?
Oh, I mean, there's so many things that I would have done differently in my first 2 years of the development team. Like I said, I didn't have any idea what I was doing. But being cut, and I'm sure plenty of athletes say this, being cut gives you so many gifts. One, simply in the motivation of trying to get back, uh, but two, putting you in just a different circumstance. And for me, putting me in college gave me the ability to kind of step back from ski racing and say, okay, I've got 4 years to get better at ski racing. Let's not think about the US ski team. Let's not think about anything besides just doing schoolwork and getting better at ski racing. And the thing that I found out about myself was that having something to keep me busy like school was great, and having that sort of mentality of just getting better and putting my head down was also good for me.
So, when you were trying to figure out how to, I guess, after post getting cut from the development team, and you were trying to figure out kind of which way to go with your career, who was mentoring you? I mean, was it kind of you on your own saying this is still a goal that I have, even though I'm no longer with the D team?
Yeah, I had a few mentors. I think a lot of athletes can attest to this. You kind of gather as you go through your career, you kind of gather mentors, and there's certain coaches that just get you a little bit more than other people. And so I had one coach from high school that I was staying in contact with that helped. Um, at the end of the day, a lot of it was just kind of me trying to figure out what worked best for me. Um, and when I say I got cut from the development team, I officially got cut, but there was this one coach of the US Ski Team who was running the new development program, who said, "Yeah, I'll help you out. You can train with me for a little bit." And he was a huge help, not only giving me some training opportunities, but also just his experience. He had spent a lot of time with World Cup athletes, and he gave me a ton of pearls of wisdom that I still use today.
What's one of them that comes to mind?
Yeah, I remember I was
I'm gonna
having
put you on the spot.
yeah, no, this is one I still think about. I was thinking about it this morning, but I was having a tough training day, and he took me aside and he said, you have the same problem that this, successful Olympic athlete had, and it's that you have too many expectations. My goal for you is to, anytime you have an expectation pop into your head, bang your head against a wall. And he said, I'm not telling you to do that because there would be liability issues with that, but I kind of am telling you to do that. Basically, like, I want you to get the idea that expectations don't help you in any way. And that was the lesson, was like, yeah, you can have goals and you can say, my goal is to go to the Olympics. My goal is to win a gold medal. But if that is your expectation, then you're going to be disappointed. You're going to tear yourself apart, because when you have an expectation, it means that if you fail, then it's utter, there's no option for failure. Whereas just simply working hard and having a goal, you give yourself the option for failure. And so living life, not just ski racing, but life with no expectations, it means that, you know, you're kind of always pleasantly surprised, which I love, as opposed to expecting huge things and then them not happening and you being disappointed.
That was quite intense. And
I
like
hope people
how
are following me on that.
that is, I'm sure that changed your entire perspective on everything, even outside of your sport. So how do you implement that kind of allowance of failure outside of ski racing? I mean, like how does that materialize in your day-to-day life?
It manifested itself in one way when I decided to take this job at Ski Racing Media, running their podcast. And I decided that I was going to um, just go out on a limb and see if I could get more people interested in podcasts. So I created these characters, I guess you'd call them, where I would talk in a Norwegian accent or I'd talk in a Austrian accent and kind of have conversations with myself in this podcast. And ultimately it was a failure. And uh, no one was really thought it that funny, and no one really liked it. And mind you, there's like thousands of people listening to this podcast, and that was a total failure. But just the ability to kind of go like, whatever, if I fail, I fail. And you learn the most from failure anyway. So
So
uh,
how long do people normally stay in ski racing? I mean, what is the longevity of a career?
it's there's kind of this cutoff. Like, if you don't make the US ski team after you finish college, then most people just retire because it's too expensive to try to do it on your own and keep trying to make the US team. So there's that cutoff right there at there's the cutoff before college at 18, is a cutoff after college at 22, and then a successful career, someone will go to 35. Ted Ligety, I think, went close to 35 or maybe a little past it. And at that point, your body is kind of breaking down. No one gets to 40.
So when are you normally sustaining injuries? Is it earlier in your career or later on?
It's kind of all over the place. The ones earlier in your career are less likely to be like knee. Some people's knees just kind of start to give out because they've had too many knee injuries by the time they're in their 30s, or their back, just start their discs are all deteriorated. So I think, like other sports, it's overuse by the end and just trauma in the beginning.
Wow. So you had a quote in our pre-interview. You said, "If you aren't sending it, you aren't working hard enough." Do you
Yeah,
stand by that?
I stand by that. You always have to be sending it. Then there's no other option. And ski racers know this, and I think any person in the world can relate to that feeling of regret, where you had an opportunity to go all out, or uh, try your hardest, or whatever it is, quote unquote, sending it, and you didn't, and it's an awful feeling. And so me and a lot of other ski racers will always say it's better to crash sending it than it is to finish and go, I could have given more.
Wow. So what does that landscape look like? My dogs are barking. What does that landscape look like now that you're rehabbing from an injury? You've sent it and it has backfired on you, and now you're kind of working back up to the point that you're at.
Yeah, I mean, the caveat to the whole sending it thing is you can't recklessly send it. Even ski racers have an understanding of what reckless means. And I don't know if I was being reckless, but I definitely, in order to make sure that you don't keep getting hurt, you have to have a really good understanding of where the limit is. um yeah, I guess that's just something that's important.
And the limit for you was in Italy by
The
yourself,
limit for me was in Italy.
across the world from your family,
Yeah.
and suddenly you're getting airlifted and you
Yep,
end up
suddenly
in
I'm
Austria in an Austrian hospital. What was
well
that night like?
so first they put me in the helicopter and started bringing me over to an Italian little, like, local mountain hospital. And I'm all alone because my coach wasn't able to come in the helicopter. And uh, the people in the helicopter are really nice. They try to offer me morphine, but I know that if I can't understand Italian sober, there's no way I'm understanding Italian with morphine. So I say no morphine. I got to keep my wits about me. They put me in the hospital. They give me an X-ray. The doctor comes in and starts going, Mamma mia, spaghetti, whatever, Italian. And I say, I don't speak Italian. I just speak English. And he says, broken. And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's broken. My leg's wiggling all over the place. He leaves. The nurse comes in and says, okay, we're going to get you an X-ray. And I said, I already had an X-ray. They said, okay, you're going to see the doctor. I said, I already saw the doctor. And she says, okay. And she takes my bed and just pushes me out into the hallway and puts me in a corner. And that's where I stay for the next 3 hours. Finally, my coach shows up because he had to drive, and somehow figures out getting me into an ambulance and to Austria, which is where they speak English and where they have better doctors. And I get in the ambulance and I go, okay, give me the drugs now. I can relax. And they say, oh no, ambulances, we can't give you drugs. Oh man. So it was a long 5-hour drive over the mountains of just my leg, you know, close your ears, you don't want to hear this, but my leg was just moving back and forth. And They were great in Austria though. I pulled into the hospital and it was the middle of the night and they said, we're putting a rod in your leg. And I said, great, put me under. And that was it.
So, at what point in that experience did you message your parents and say, I know you're asleep. When you wake up, please don't worry. I'm okay.
Um, I miraculously my phone was on 1% and some greater force above me was keeping it alive because for 4 hours my phone stayed alive at 1% in the hospital, allowing me to communicate with my trainer and text my parents and say, hey, just broke my tib fib. I'm okay though. My mom had to wake up to that text.
So it was nighttime. So they all of this was happening to you in Austria and Italy, and they had no idea. They were in REM.
Yeah, they were they were in REM. Yeah, they had no idea.
So did they call you and say, "Oh my gosh, like what's
Yeah,
happening? Like, can we get a status update?"
yeah, they called me. My mom's a physician. She's an OBGYN. And so uh, it was kind of like, you know, it wasn't all like, oh, are you okay? I'm so sorry. It was like she knew that the sport was dangerous. And she's like, okay, you're injured. First things first, like, what are the docs like? What kind of procedure are they going to do? Make sure it's the right procedure. Make sure, blah, 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 blah. And so she was amazing in that way.
Yeah, my
And
mom's the
yeah.
anesthesiologist, so
Mhm.
like I understand. It's she sometimes she talks about like procedures that she's helped with and they're insane. But like I would feel so confident taking medical advice from her. So I'm sure
Yeah.
that like even though your mom was across the ocean, you were still in good hands, even if you
Yeah.
couldn't speak the language.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is it like going over to a country whose official language you don't speak and being there competing in the foreign country?
A lot of the athletes do speak decent English. The Italians and the French are pretty bad, but other than that, everyone speaks okay English, and that's kind of what everyone uses to communicate. But it is kind of an interesting um, thing. It's honestly kind of nice because you can't. Whereas in the U.S., you're understanding. There's so much input coming in your ears. There's announcers. There's random kids talking while they're inspecting there's so much going into your ears, and then when you go over to Europe, you're able to block a lot out because it's just a bunch of foreign language, which is kind of nice.
It's like buzz in the background.
Yeah.
So, does that ever feel strange to you to go over and compete and just be in the zone 100% because the noise is so easy to block out?
It doesn't it necessarily feel weird. uh it feels good for sure. um just getting in that zone is kind of a big part of the allure of ski racing, is
So,
finding that zone.
do you have any psychologists on staff that help you get into that mindset? Or is it kind of you having to figure it out yourself? I mean, is there a sports psychologist that is available to you?
Yeah, the US team employs a sports psychologist, and I talk with her probably once every 2 weeks, and she's pretty helpful. I, and I've talked to sports psychologists over the years. I remember in my early years in high school, I really struggled, uh, you know, performing on race day. I think it's something that a lot of athletes can attest to. Like, no matter how good you are, when it's not competition day or not game day, performing in the moment is kind of what separates the good from the great. And so that's always been something I've been working on. And a lot of times, though, at the end of the day, I've realized that a sports psychologist can give you as much advice as they're going to give you. If you can't figure out how to do it yourself, and if you can't learn about your own brain, then you're never, they can't help you at all.
Yeah. So when you were at Dartmouth and trying to make the team and make a name for yourself, was there anyone at that level that was helping you outside of your coaching staff?
That's fun. It's funny because that year at Dartmouth, I I had spent a lot of time working with sports psych in the years prior, And that year I said, screw it. I don't want to think about, I'm sick of thinking about sports psychology. I'm not thinking about it at all. And I remember there was just no thought of it in my brain. And I just kind of skied. And I had this like these two things that I thought about. I was like, okay, outside ski, hips over the feet. I just had these two things I would say in my head to keep like cues to keep me skiing the way I wanted to. And that's literally all I did. And it was one of my best years of racing.
Yeah, I mean, on this podcast, we talk a lot about the impact of psychology on whatever sport they're playing. And a lot of them have experience with sports psychologists, but there are a couple that I've talked to that have said, I haven't had anyone that has helped me with this. It's just kind of through my coaching staff or athletic trainers, I picked up kind of tidbits of information, but no one has
Yeah.
ever been like, here's a detailed plan of how we're
Yeah.
going to go about competing. And the pre-race ritual for a lot of people, whether it's a pre-competition ritual, is crucial. I mean, I talk to a lot of baseball pitchers who talk about pre-pitch routines because you
Mhm.
essentially have to redo the same motions over and over. And baseball players are so superstitious. They have this whole
Yeah.
routine that they do, but it puts them in the zone, and each sport has that. So
Mhm.
hearing you say that you have a routine, and even while you're going down the hill, that you have these cues that you give yourself is really cool because it shows in every different sport differently.
Yeah. And actually, the one thing I forgot to mention was most ski racers do this is visualization, where you're allowed to go slowly go down the course and just look at where the gates are before you do your competition run. But you get you get two competition runs, but it's like you have to perform the first time you get on the course. And so a lot of what I'll do is have the image of the course in my mind, and then run the course in my mind, over and over and over again until I know it by heart. Um, and that's kind of a ritual that I totally forgot about. But yeah, that's another one.
Yeah, I think that in a couple podcasts ago, I was talking with my guest about the negatives of visualization because if you only visualize yourself winning, it's going to be easier to mess up and potentially get injured. So you have to work through both the positives and every single potential negative that can happen. Is that how it works for you? I mean, do you think I could get injured, I could mess up, or is it this is exactly how I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it successfully every time?
Oh no, visualization's so hard for me. I actually don't do it as much as other people because I just feel like sometimes I'm skiing the course in my mind, and it's like, oh, my ski just fell off. And I was like, why does my mind do that to me? Uh, so I just I do a couple runs in the course and I don't really overthink it too much. Uh, with visualization and with sports psych in general, there's this nice bell curve where like you have to think about it a little bit, then it's helpful, and then you start thinking about it more and more and more, and suddenly you get in these weird zones where you're like, I hope that I'm thinking not too much about this, but just the right amount this. And then you realize that you're thinking about how much you're thinking about how much you're thinking about something. And that is just a total mess. So I try to like do nice little doses of mental, visualization and tools and whatever. And other than that, just not think about it.
Yeah, I think that overthinking is not necessarily something that we as sports psychologists think about, but when we're telling an athlete what to do and they're trying to implement it, the onus is kind of on them to find that happy medium. I mean, not to focus too much, but also focus enough that it's implementable. So we just kind of like let you go and implement and then see what happens. But it's fun being on like listening to your perspective because it is really easy to overthink those kind of things when you're trying to get in the zone
Yeah,
and you're trying not to overdo it.
definitely. Yeah, and you can get in spirals if you're talking to a sports psych about overthinking, and then you realize you're overthinking. It's a paradox.
And so especially in a sport where everything can change in a second. I mean, you could put your ski down wrong
Mhm.
and suddenly you're injured, you're breaking something, or you're losing. How in the zone do you have to be constantly when you're going down the whatever course you're doing?
I mean, you got to be really in the zone. But when I think about the zone, um, there's so many different there's so many different versions of it. That I sometimes I'm too much in the zone and I'm not paying attention to what my body's doing. Uh, and sometimes I think that the zone is better defined as letting is letting your body do what it knows how to do. And so if you're able to turn off negative thoughts, if you're able to turn off distractions, uh and then just kind of be a little more in tune with your body knows what to do because you've been training for hundreds and thousands of hours. And so for me, that's what the zone is. And so sometimes I'll be in the zone and I'll be absolutely ripping down a course, and I'll be able to like have thoughts in my head because I've just let my body do. I could have thoughts about lunch in my head if my body is just really knows what it's doing. For the most part, that's not what happens. That I'm like fully in the moment. But there's different versions of it, and that's my definition.
Yeah. So let's talk about the injury deadline for that's built into the process
Yeah.
and
So
how you just narrowly made it in.
yeah, this was a weird year. The US ski team has a deadline, February 1st. If you get injured before then, you automatically requalify for the next year as a quote unquote injury discretion. And if not, then you must have scored the right points or qualified objectively through the criteria process. And so I was I was just ahead of the deadline, and my teammate blew out his back, 2 weeks behind the deadline, and he's a better skier than me, and he got cut, and I'm still going, and it's kind of this arbitrary thing that exists.
So when you did get injured, what what was the atmosphere around your return? Because they decided that because you were inside the deadline, they were going to keep you and help you rehab where your teammate did not get any of those luxuries.
Yeah, it was nice when I got hurt. I knew about that deadline, and so it was nice to know that I was going to have support the next year. And that was a huge, I think I would have been a lot more distraught if I had realized I had gotten hurt and suddenly the road had just gotten way harder in terms of the resources available to me. So having the US ski team commit to that deadline is really nice.
So what did they tell you was the road forward? I mean, this is not necessarily an uncommon injury for ski racers to sustain. So did they have a plan in place for your rehab going in?
Yeah, a lot of stuff is up to you, because there's 20 athletes on the men's team throughout the levels of the team, and so they can't keep track of everyone. And just as with the team and as in life, you kind of got to figure out things for yourself and be your own best advocate. So I figured out getting physical therapy and at first getting my own trainer and then writing my own workouts. Um, but the team was basically like, when it's time to be back on snow, we will support you in any and every way. So basically, when you're ready to go, we'll head over to Mount Hood in Oregon in July and get going.
Where's the coolest place that you've traveled?
um the Dolomites in Italy are really really cool because they're just these crazy spires and really tall spiky mountains. So I usually say that's the coolest place I've been.
And does it feel good coming back to the US after a race? Or are you just kind of like another day, another dollar?
No, it feels good. I usually stop off at my grandparents' house on the coast and get a surf session in, which by the end of your trip in Europe, you always like want to be done with ski racing for a little bit because you're just in it 100% all the time, all the time. And the other thing I look forward to is Mexican food, because there's zero semblance of Mexican food in Europe, and I absolutely love it.
So you said at the very beginning of this interview, if you hadn't have turned into a ski racer, you would be doing something in motion like surfing. Do you see that continuing after your ski racing career is over?
Yeah, I think it's motion and speed are so ingrained in me that I will forever be, if I'm not skiing, I will forever be surfing or biking, or something like that. It's just kind of, you know, is just a it's just a part of me. Yeah.
So what do ski racers do post competition?
As in, like, right after they finish their competition
Oh, no, no,
ski
no.
run.
So like after they retire from the sport.
Oh, um, it's a lot become, those that didn't go to college become coaches, because that's kind of their only option. And a lot enjoy being coaches because they just love the sport and they want to give back all the knowledge that they have. But a lot retire and are kind of lost because you spend so much time traveling with this great tribe of people, and then suddenly, in a way, you're ejected from the tribe. You no longer, whereas skiing was your purpose in life, you no longer have a purpose. And so there's a lot of people that just really struggle to find what their purpose is after ski racing. And I think I mentioned this in the pre-interview, but I was talking with my teammate the other day, and we were saying, do you think it's inevitable that we'll just be totally lost? Or, like, do you think there's a way for us to be, like, hit the ground running right when we're done ski racing? And I think I've decided that just knowing that it's coming is helpful. But I also think that there's definitely a sort of grieving process when you retire, as with any sport. That's such a huge part of your life. When you retire, there's a it's kind of like a divorce or whatever.
Yeah, I had an episode of this podcast where I was talking to a baseball player and he had been just going through some mental issues related to his ability to pitch, and then suddenly he walked away from the sport because he was like,
Wow.
I'm not enjoying it. I went to a lift session where I normally was loving what I was doing, and I looked at my trainer and I said, I don't want to be here anymore. And suddenly he never played baseball again. And so that process happens at a different point for every single person, and
Yeah.
it's inevitable that you break up with your sport at some point. And for some it's more difficult than others. I mean, for your anecdote, it's like just being shoved out of an airplane. Like
Yeah.
you were so set on flying through the sky, and then suddenly you get injured and you're hurling toward the ground. And maybe you have a parachute of an idea of how to move forward, and maybe you don't.
Mhm.
And is there anyone helping you with that removal from the team? I mean, your life after competitive ski racing?
Um, you know, my my dad's always never was, ski racing, you don't make a ton of money ski racing unless you're the best of the best. So my dad's always like, what are you doing after ski racing? Have you thought about what you're doing after ski racing, all the time? And so I've got that kind of voice in my ear, like, making sure that it's a priority that I have something after ski racing. Um, but at the end of the, I don't want to sound, I, I, I don't want to sound, kind of isolated when I say that at the end of the day, your best advice comes from yourself. And so, eh, you know, I use my support system. My mom's always telling me, like, make sure you, like, use your support system and you ask everyone for advice and you use your mentors. And I definitely do. And I make a really good effort to use all the people that I know can help me out. But at the end of the day, when you're ski racing, and you're traveling all around, sometimes it ends up the only consistent person that's always with you is you. And um, I've become confident in my ability to, have conversations with myself and at the end of the road at retirement, you know, use my support system of other people, but also use myself.
So, how have you built up that self confidence through the years that you're going to have a plan and it's going to be okay?
Um, I think it's just it goes back to my embracing of failure, or at least my attempt to embrace failure. Uh, and when you fail a bunch, you start to realize like, oh, it's not that bad. Like, you know, when I broke my leg, like the first thought was this sucks, but then I'm kind of like, oh, you know, the pain's not that bad. You know, like I'll be back before I know it's not that bad. And then you start to realize, you know, that, you know, if I get to the retirement and I utterly fail, I'm still alive. So I'll figure it out.
So, now that you are almost halfway through your rehab, I mean, what does your return to sport look like?
It's basically I'm not running yet. I can't jump or run yet. So that's my next step. And then it's kind of funny because I probably won't be running by the time I get back on skis because there's not a whole lot of impact on skis. And I'll literally just like slide around. Um, I won't, you know, put much force. I won't go that fast. And then you know, as I heal more and more, I'll be able to go faster and start putting more force into my leg.
Wow, so you are going back on skis before you're kind of able to move the bottom half of your body without pain.
Kind of, but you know, I've never done it before, so we'll see how it goes and how the protocol actually works. But from asking around, that's what I've decided is that you're not 100% healthy by the time you start getting back in ski boots and just making sure that you can, you know, start progressing.
Is that, I guess, kind of scary knowing that although you are going to be cleared eventually, you're going to forever ski with the knowledge that my leg has been broken before? Because that's what a lot of athletes that return from injury constantly have in their mind, like my refracture rate is really high, and if I do something just a little bit differently, I could tear it all apart again.
It's definitely scary. I definitely will be sitting around sometimes and the thought just pops into my head like when I broke my leg, it was I had you know, it wasn't really a crash. It was like I just like went onto my hip. I like slid out. I've done that a million times, but my leg just caught weirdly this time. And so I'm definitely kind of scared. I'm like, damn, it can happen so fast and so quickly. Like, how can I possibly prevent it again? So that's definitely scary. But the only thing you can do is just kind of keep feeding yourself confident, you know, words and keep trusting in your body
And send it.
and send it.
So where do you see yourself being in 5 years?
The goal is to be on the World Cup and fighting for a win. That's, you know, really it's just, you know, the goal is to be best in the world. And right now, you know, whether that takes me 5 years or 10 years, I'm not too concerned about it. Right now, the next step forward is just to get back on snow and keep my head down and keep moving.
What do you think about the fact that people would look at you and what you're doing and think that you are just crushing it and they want to be like you?
I mean, that's cool if people think that. I don't feel like I'm this, you know, super cool or something you should strive to be. No, I'm just a kid that really likes ski racing and is like just puts my head down and keeps working. Um, so I guess that's what I would say to that.
And then to have your entire family kind of be behind you in whatever you want to do. with ski racing or without? I mean, what does having that support system that introduced you to the sport that you now love and to have your siblings ski race with you? I mean, what does that it has kind of become a family outing. So is
Yeah,
that cool?
it is cool. When we lived in Massachusetts, and then when I wanted to ski race full time, when the coaches were basically like, if you want to be world class, you have to ski every day. So the whole family moved to Vermont, which was cool, and it made me feel really good that my family was so supportive that they were willing to uproot and move. Granted, my sister really wanted to ski race too, and both my brothers did. And nowadays, it's just me and my ninth grade brother who still ski race. Uh, and it feels great to have the family so supportive. And I know that there's, I don't know too many families that aren't supportive, but I definitely feel really grateful that my family is.
I mean, to have your entire family uproot their lives and move for you to get you more opportunities. I mean, did you feel like you had to prove that their choice to believe in you was worth doing? I mean, was there any pressure knowing that your family had completely changed their lives in order for you to have a better chance at succeeding?
Yeah, there wasn't a ton of pressure because I was, as most high school kids are, like I was, you think about yourself a lot more than you think about other people. So I think in some ways I took it for granted and didn't pressure myself too much. But the actual move of the entire family, you know, up to Vermont it made it real. And it made it so that this wasn't just something I was doing. This is something that I was going to succeed in. And if I woke up in the morning on an early morning with a lack of motivation, that was kind of one of the things I could think about, like, hey, this isn't just a game, this is real.
And then let's talk about the podcast
Yeah.
and how your coach did not approve at the beginning.
Oh, oh my goodness. Yeah, I did the podcast last spring. And then when I showed up for our first summer training camp, my coach was like, "Hey, I hate the podcast." And I was like, "Come on, like it's not that bad." And he said his reasoning was, "I don't want you to be the journalist. I don't want you to be putting all these people that you interview on the World Cup on a pedestal. I want you beating the people that you're." Uh, oh my God, that's so funny. I just got a call. I just got a call from him.
He knows we're talking about him.
Yeah, well, I'll have to respond to that in a little bit. But uh, anyway, it took a lot of convincing, and basically my argument was, look at how good my season was when I went to Dartmouth and I had school. My brain can't handle overthinking ski racing and not having another creative outlet. I need this other creative outlet, and uh, I was able to convince him of that, and he ultimately is a fan of it. Last season I had the podcast, and up until I broke my leg, I was skiing really well, and he was able to see that diversion of attention was really helpful.
Yeah. So now what is the hope that this podcast becomes?
The the goal, I get distracted and I get all sorts of ideas, and so some days I'm like, I want the podcast to be this, I want it to be this. Ultimately, I've decided the goal is just to help the sport of ski racing as much as I can, and a lot of that involves interviewing these World Cup athletes, and hopefully people will listen that will gain something valuable in their lives, either as people or ski racers. And then the other thing I'm trying to do is kind of, I haven't really talked to anybody about this really as a
Ooh,
serious
we
idea
have an
yet, but
exclusive.
exclusive. The goal is to create some sort of content, some sort of guides for people who are just joining the sport of ski racing. Because the thing that I hate about the sport the most is how exclusive it is. It's expensive, but not only that, even if you have the funds to start to get to high levels, then you don't have the knowledge unless you're born into the ski racing world. So my parents were skiers, but that did nothing for me when it came to tuning my edges and waxing my skis and knowing these weird terms like gates and undergates and offset and panels. Like, you know, how are people supposed to know that? So maybe I'll kind of create some guides for people to get into sport and make it more inclusive.
Yeah, I think that you automatically have credibility in that regard because you're living it, and there's no one that can better write a guidebook on something than someone who's going through it. And so I think that if you allow that platform to become what you've just talked about, I don't think that there's a way for it to fail because there's going to be another generation of ski racers and they're going to need guidance. And if you can be that guidance for them, I don't think that there's a way that that could go wrong.
Well, that's the goal. Well, we'll see how successful I am at it.
So is there anything else that you want to talk about regarding ski racing or your injury that I haven't covered?
Um, yes.
Okay.
Wait, we talked about this in the pre-interview, and I had an idea in my head. I
Okay.
think the biggest thing is, communicating to people that don't understand, logically doesn't make sense. We talked about this earlier. Logically, it doesn't make sense why someone would send it and risk so much of uh, their body, their mind, their livelihood on a weird sport that is just a kind of fun. And I hope that people can understand risk a little bit better and see that risk isn't just this black and white thing of why should I take that risk because there's a chance of failure. You should kind of look at risk as a necessary part of sport and life. And the rewards of risk are huge, and the ultimate cost of failure, for me, it's a broken leg. The ultimate cost of failure of, say, asking for a raise at work is just getting shut down. So it's like, and once you break your leg, you're like, yeah, it sucks, but I'm still alive and living, and it's not that bad. And so the one thing I hope that I can kind of communicate to anybody who's listening is that risks, it's worth sending it.
I'd actually written, so normally when I write my questions, I have three different focuses that I want to kind of address in the interview. And one of my focuses for this interview, I wrote risk taking is fun.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
because that was kind of the overarching sentiment in our pre-interview, and I thought it was so unique to your experience.
yeah, risk taking it, like, that's another positive of risk taking. It's fun. I'm not, like, disclaimer here, I'm not telling people to go like jump off cliffs suddenly. Like, the whole point of risk is like risk management and how much is should you take. But yeah, risk is fun.
So how do you monitor the amount of risk that you're taking? How do you manage the risk?
It just comes down to experience. Like, uh I've spent so much time on skis. I can just tell when I'm pushing it too far, and or kind of where the limit is. When you ski at a big ski resort, and there's on the main trails, they'll have these slow signs, and they'll have ski patrollers, and they'll wave you down if you're going too fast. And I'm always getting waved down because they say you're out of control, and they don't understand that I'm very in control. I'm just able to go fast while being in control. It's the same way that you can drive on the highway at 70 miles an hour and be completely in control. Um, and then if you start taking corners at 70 miles an hour, then you start to realize that you're not in control. But there's people who have driven for a lot of their lives can kind of understand that um, it's easy to do dangerous things while being in control.
So do you think that starting looking at where you started and then now, do you think that you send it more now or more when you were just starting? I mean, are you focused more on the speed now or when you were just starting?
It's a more refined send. the send of 5 years ago was a little more reckless and a little less understanding of where the limit was. And I think now there's a little bit more of an understanding of where the limit is. And so I think I'm sending it more, and I'm sending it more consistently. But you also start to, fear just increases the older you get. I think I consider myself young, but when you've been ski racing for 20 years, like that's 20 years for you to start to realize how dangerous it is. So that's kind of a constant battle when you're sending it, is acknowledging the fear and kind of pushing it away.
Just need to put the fear blinders on.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, that's must be something that you just have to deal with every single race. You say, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And then whatever happens between here and the bottom is what happens.
Yeah, it's so much easier said than done. That's my ultimate framework. Whatever happens, happens. It's easier said than done. At the end of the day, it comes down to like all of these different, very natural thoughts in your head, like fear and nerves and expectations. Like they're always going to be knocking at the door. And the successful races are the ones where you're able to uh, not let them affect your mental state.
Yeah. So I think that that is all I have to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that your episode will come out in 3 weeks. So I'm pretty excited for it. You're my first ski racer.
Yeah.
You're actually, I think, my first winter sport at all. So welcome.
Well, I'm
Happy to
honored.
have you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I feel very grateful to you because hopefully I'm able to, you know, help even a single person out with my story. And I like your interview style and your kind of overall ethos. I like it.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
I yeah, I'll message you when it comes out, but I think it will be 3 weeks from today. So, or 3 weeks from Wednesday.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
Yeah. Just let me know. And if you need me to like post on my social about it, I can do that.
can you just send me a picture? It can either be you in action or just something to use for our social media.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you can just email it. I mean, you can either just DM me on Instagram or you can send it to the email that we've been corresponding through.
Okay. Um, uh, yeah, I'll send it via email. I think
Okay.
that's easy. I have it on my computer, so I'll do that.
And then I'll just talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thanks for the
Have a
interview,
good
and
day.
yeah, have a good day and good luck with the podcast.
Thank you. Good luck with your rehab.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.